Hey there, welcome back to episode 3 of the Fly Oz Backcountry Training Series. In this episode, we're going to dig in a little bit deeper on our conventional geared airplanes and talk about tailwheel specialty landings. Once again, my name is Lucas, and like many others, before I started teaching backcountry flying, I taught a lot of tailwheel and developed a deep love of and respect for tail draggers. So let's dig into two forms of tailwheel specialty landings, the tail-low wheel landing and the tail-first three-point landing, or as I affectionately refer to it, the kerchunk landing. This time around we'll venture out from the immediate Bentonville area and do some work at a fantastic cluster of 4 backcountry strips known to locals as Banks Ranch. But first let's take a look at it in the more controlled environment at the grass strip at Bentonville. The tail-low wheel landing approach is done basically just like any other spot landing approach. The difference is that instead of tucking the tail all the way in and then holding it down, we touch with the tail wheel almost on the ground and then raise it for the rest of the rollout. This provides a number of advantages as well as some disadvantages. Probably the greatest advantage is that we get a good slow approach while still maintaining good visibility over the nose. But we're also much less susceptible to wind gusts, and if it's done smoothly we have superior braking authority and a much higher level of tailwheel protection. Now let's look at a tail-low wheel landing approach out in the wild, landing south on the Warwick Hollow strip at Banks Ranch. We're not doing anything different as we make the approach here. We're still holding a spot landing attitude by flying the wing. The difference is when we get down to the flare. Pull back on the stick just enough to slow our descent and lower the tail slightly. Then as soon as the main wheels brush the grass, it's good forward elevator pressure to raise the tail for as much of the rollout as we can. Be cautious with this technique, as it does come with some disadvantages. The main disadvantage being that there's less prop clearance than there is with a full 3-point or tail-first 3-point landing. The other disadvantage is that it requires a bit more finesse than a tail-low 3-point landing. In this landing I forced it on a little bit and I got a longer roll because of the bouncing main wheels and their inability to grab the ground with brake application. That being said, this tends to be my go-to landing in our Huskies and other light aircraft on large bush wheels and extended gear, due to the aggressive stance that they take on the ground and the high angle of attack needed to fully flare them. Our next specialty landing is the tail-low 3-point or kerchunk landing. Once again, nothing really changes with our approach. However, our goal in the flare is going to be to flare hard enough and get the angle of attack high enough that the tail wheel touches before the main wheels. This may be no easy feat in a high-performance bush plane. This Husky, for example, sets at a fairly aggressive angle of attack and has a lot of weight on the nose with its big engine. As a result, a tail-first touchdown can take full aft elevator or even a burst of power to blow the tail down. Once again, this technique comes with advantages and disadvantages. Our biggest advantage is probably that prop clearance, but this approach also allows us to have the slowest possible airspeed on touchdown. You can see the evidence of that in the length of this roll. This was my shortest landing of the day by a good 25 feet or so. Although to be fair, that distance probably doesn't matter much in the real world, it's still worth noting. Just to keep me good and humble, and so this isn't just a highlight reel, let's follow in on a bit of a botched tail-low 3-point landing at Banks Ranch. In this approach I fell prey to that heavy weight on the nose and didn't quite get the tail down where I wanted it. The result is a good old crow hop, where the tail jumps up and down and the angle of attack porpoises with each bounce. As long as the bouncing isn't severe, we can recover from this by continuing to gently work the stick back. This method also has its disadvantages. The high angle of attack on the approach can leave you pretty susceptible to wind gusts. This is especially critical in light and high lift aircraft like Huskies and Cubs. Additionally, the high angle of attack on landing hurts your forward visibility. And some aircraft, especially those on spring gear or bungees, tend to bounce if you plop the mains on firmly. You can sometimes correct this bounce by throwing the flaps out after you touch. On this landing I was set to come just a little short of my aiming point and gave it just a little too much power. You can see the resulting longer roll. Not great, but still a better outcome than coming short. Because of some of these limiting factors, I tend to use this landing mainly when I'm worried about my prop, or in heavier airplanes with better forward visibility like Mauls and 100 series Cessnas. Still, there's no better way to start a heated argument amongst tailwheel pilots than to bring up the old 2-point versus 3-point debate. What works for me in a Maul or a Husky may not work for you, and vice versa. So get with an instructor, get out there and try it for yourself, make up your own mind. What I've found is that there's a time and a place for each technique, and it's best to learn to be proficient in both styles. Thanks for joining us today. Whether you're a pilot looking for backcountry training, an aircraft owner looking for information on Ozark strips to fly into, or potentially looking to charter a flight into the backcountry, check out flyoz.com for more info. Heads up nosewheel drivers, our next episode will be focused solely on backcountry operations in nosewheel aircraft like the Cessna 182, before we move on to non-standard approaches and more. We'll see you next time. Fly safe.